In a small town nestled between rolling hills, life moved at a slower pace. The streets were lined with trees that provided shade on hot summer days, and neighbors knew each other by name. This town had its charm, but beneath its quiet surface lay deep-rooted tensions, especially around race and the local police department. Mies Clara was a beloved figure in the community. At 75 years old, she had lived through a lot, including the civil rights movement. She often reminisced about those times while sitting on her porch, sharing stories with anyone who would listen. Despite her frail health, Ms. Clara always wore a bright smile and had a warm word for everyone. She had a way of making people feel valued, whether it was through her homemade cookies or her wise advice. But as much as Ms. Clara was loved, she was also vulnerable. Her body was starting to betray her. She struggled with arthritis and a heart condition that left her feeling tired. Still, Ms. Clara was determined to maintain her independence. Every Wednesday, she made a point to visit the local grocery store to pick up essentials. It was a ritual that connected her to the community and kept her spirits high. One fateful Wednesday, she decided to venture out despite feeling unwell. As she walked slowly down the street, her cane tapping against the pavement, she couldn't help but notice the familiar sights. The bakery where she bought fresh bread, the park where children played, and the corner shop where she exchanged pleasantries with the owner. It was a comforting routine, but this day would turn into something she never expected. As Ms. Clara crossed the street to reach the grocery store, a police car pulled up beside her. Officer Ryan was behind the wheel, known in town for his aggressive demeanor and questionable attitudes towards the black community. He had been on the force for several years, and stories of his conduct had circulated among the townsfolk. Many people had seen him act out against those he deemed suspicious, often based on their race. "Hey, you can't just walk across the street like that," he shouted, his voice booming as if he were addressing a criminal. Miss Clara turned slowly, her heart racing, not fully understanding why she was being stopped. She was just an old lady trying to buy groceries. "I'm sorry, officer. I'm just trying to get to the store," she replied softly, her hands trembling slightly on her cane. But instead of hearing her out, Officer Ryan jumped out of the car, anger flashing in his eyes. He didn't see a sick old lady, he saw someone he could exert power over. Miss Clara felt a chill run down her spine as he approached her aggressively, demanding her identification. "You think you can just do whatever you want?" he sneered, and Miss Clara's heart sank. She was confused and scared, struggling to keep her balance as he grabbed her arm roughly. Despite her protests about her age and health, Officer Ryan didn't relent. He twisted her arm behind her back and, with a grunt, pushed her toward his car. The world around her seemed to blur, and she could hear her heart pounding in her ears. "Help! Someone help me!" she cried out, but it felt like her voice was lost in the chaos. As people began to gather, shocked by what they were witnessing, Miss Clara realized that this was more than just an embarrassing moment. It was a display of raw power and prejudice. The warm sun that had once felt comforting now seemed to hang heavy above her, casting long shadows of injustice. Little did they all know, this moment would ignite a fire within the community, one that would spark a demand for change and justice for Ms. Clara. As Ms. Clara struggled to comprehend the chaotic scene unfolding around her, the shock and disbelief of her neighbors began to settle in. Many people had come out of their homes, drawn by her cries for help. They stood watching, some with their mouths agape, others whispering in disbelief. How could this happen to Ms. Clara, the kind old lady who had always been there for everyone? Officer Ryan, meanwhile, seemed unfazed by the gathering crowd. He was too focused on exerting his authority, believing he was above everyone else. He shoved Ms. Clara into the back of the police car as she winced from the pain in her arm. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest," he barked, as if that made any sense. Miss Clara felt tears welling in her eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from the humiliation of being treated like a criminal when all she had done was try to cross the street. As the police car door slammed shut, the crowd erupted. People began to shout, demanding to know what was happening. "She's just an old lady," one neighbor yelled. "What are you doing?" another added, anger rising in their voices. But Officer Ryan remained unmoved. He was used to this kind of hostility, and it only fueled his arrogance. He turned his back on the crowd, insisting he was just doing his job. Among the onlookers was Mr. Johnson, a local shopkeeper who had known Ms. Clara for years. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. He rushed forward, trying to talk to Officer Ryan. "You can't treat her like this. She's not a criminal," he pleaded, hoping to reach some sense of humanity in the officer. But Ryan merely scoffed, dismissing Mr. Johnson with a wave of his hand. "Stay out of this, old man, or you'll be next," he warned. Feeling helpless, the crowd's anger grew. They were fed up with the police department's behavior, especially when it came to how they treated people of color in their town. Ms. Clara was a well-loved member of their community, and seeing her being treated like a common criminal was the last straw. People began to pull out their phones, recording the scene as evidence of the injustice. Meanwhile, Ms. Clara sat in the back of the police car, her heart racing. She felt scared and alone, but deep down, she also felt a spark of determination. She knew she had to fight back, not just for herself, but for everyone in the community who had suffered similar treatment. In the midst of the chaos, her daughter Maya was thousands of miles away, unaware of what was happening. Maya had her own life to manage, working a demanding job in the city and caring for her own family. But as soon as she received the call from a family friend about her mother's arrest, panic ripped her heart. She quickly gathered her things and made arrangements to return to her hometown, ready to support her mother in any way she could. Back at the police station, the tension was palpable. Officer Ryan returned to the station, feeling victorious. He thought he had shown Ms. Clara who was in charge, but deep inside, he felt a nagging sense of unease. He knew that the community had grown tired of his behavior, but he pushed those thoughts aside. He believed he could intimidate anyone who challenged him. Yet, as news spread and more people began to rally around Ms. Clara, it became clear that Officer Ryan's actions would not go unnoticed. The love and support for Ms. Clara were powerful, and the town was beginning to unite against the injustice they had all witnessed. A change was coming, and neither Ms. Clara nor Officer Ryan could have anticipated how their lives were about to intertwine in ways that would forever alter the fabric of their community. The news of Ms. Clara's arrest spread quickly through the small town, igniting outrage and disbelief among the residents. People gathered in groups on street corners, discussing what had happened, their voices filled with anger and concern. Ms. Clara was not just an old woman. She was a friend, a neighbor, and a pillar of the community. To see her treated so cruelly by Officer Ryan was simply unacceptable. As the day went on, more and more people reached out to one another. The community was buzzing with a sense of unity and purpose. Miss Clara had always been there for everyone, and now it was their turn to stand up for her. They began to share stories of how she had helped them over the years, whether it was baking cookies for a school bake sale, helping a neighbor fix their car, or simply being a listening ear when someone needed to talk. In her cozy little home, Miss Clara sat in the police station, feeling anxious and vulnerable. The officer had taken her purse, leaving her without her medication or even her reading glasses. She was scared and frustrated, wondering how things had gone so wrong. She had always believed that kindness and understanding would triumph over hate. Yet here she was, facing the harsh reality of the world outside her front door. But Ms. Clara was not the type to give up easily. She had faced struggles throughout her life and had always found a way to push through. As she sat there, waiting to hear what would happen next, she thought of her daughter, Maya. Miss Clara knew Maya would be worried about her and would do everything in her power to help. Just thinking about her daughter gave her strength, reminding her that she was not alone in this fight. Outside the police station, a small crowd began to form. Friends and neighbors started to show up, holding signs that read "Justice for Ms. Clara" and "Stand Against Racism." Their voices echoed through the streets, creating a powerful wave of support. As they chanted, more people joined in, adding their voices to the call for justice. Among the crowd was Mr. Johnson, who had always admired Ms. Clara's courage and compassion. He stepped forward and addressed the gathering. "This is not just about Ms. Clara. It's about all of us. We must stand together against this kind of treatment. No one should have to go through what she did today." The crowd roared in agreement, their voices rising higher and higher. While the community rallied outside, Officer Ryan was inside the station, feeling the pressure mount. He had always prided himself on being tough, but the anger and determination of the townspeople rattled him. He could hear the chants outside, and it made him uneasy. For the first time, he realized that he might not be the invincible figure he thought he was. Back at home, Maya was in a frenzy as she made her way to the town. The longer she drove, the more anxious she became. She was flooded with worry about her mother, fearing the worst. What if she was hurt? What if she needed her medication? Thoughts raced through her mind as she thought of all the times Ms. Clara had been there for her, supporting her through thick and thin. As Maya arrived in town, she could see the crowd gathered outside the police station. The sight filled her with a mix of pride and fear. Her heart raced as she spotted Mr. Johnson speaking to the group, urging them to stand strong. Maya quickly parked her car and joined the crowd, eager to find out what was happening. When she stepped into the crowd, she felt the energy and determination all around her. She knew she had to fight for her mother. With each passing moment, the sense of unity among the people grew stronger. They were no longer just individuals. They were a community standing together against injustice, ready to support Ms. Clara and demand that the world recognize her worth. In that moment, Maya felt a flicker of hope. Together, they would make a difference, not just for Ms. Clara, but for everyone who had ever faced injustice in their lives. The tide was turning, and change was on the horizon. Maya pushed her way through the growing crowd outside the police station, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. She could hear the chants of support for her mother, Ms. Clara, ringing in her ears as she moved closer. The sight of friends and neighbors united for a common cause filled her with a sense of purpose. These were the people who had seen her mother's kindness, the same people who would now stand up against the injustice she had suffered. As she finally reached the front, she spotted Mr. Johnson, who was still speaking to the crowd, his voice strong and steady. "We are here for Ms. Clara, and we will not let her be silenced. It's time to show the police department that we demand respect and justice for everyone in our community." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Maya felt a surge of pride wash over her. She had always known her mother was special, but seeing the support from everyone reaffirmed that belief. "Mom, where is she?" Maya shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Mr. Johnson noticed her and quickly guided her to the front, where a few other concerned citizens were discussing what to do next. "We're waiting for news," he explained, worry etched on his face. "But we won't let this go unnoticed." Maya nodded, her mind racing. She had to get inside the police station and see her mother. She pushed through the crowd, determination etched on her features. "I need to talk to someone." "My mother is in there," she exclaimed, pointing toward the building. A few community members encouraged her, urging her to be brave. Just then, a police officer stepped outside, clearly annoyed by the growing crowd. "What's going on here?" he barked, attempting to regain control of the situation. The atmosphere shifted, tension filling the air. Maya stepped forward, her voice steady but full of emotion. "My mother is Ms. Clara. She was arrested for no reason, and we demand to see her." The officer frowned, clearly taken aback by her intensity. "You need to disperse," he replied, trying to dismiss her. "This isn't a protest." But Maya stood firm, refusing to back down. "It is a protest." My mother deserves to be treated with respect, just like anyone else. She's a sick old lady, not a criminal. As the officer hesitated, the crowd rallied around Maya. They began chanting again, louder this time, "Justice for Ms. Clara. Justice for Ms. Clara." The sound echoed through the streets, growing stronger with every passing moment. It was a wave of determination that seemed impossible to ignore. Realizing the situation was getting out of hand, the officer reluctantly agreed to let Maya in to see her mother. "Fine, but only you," he said, crossing his arms as he motioned for her to enter. Maya wasted no time, stepping into the building and feeling a mix of dread and hope wash over her. Inside the station, the atmosphere was tense. Maya's heart raced as she walked down the hallway, each step echoing in her mind. She felt a sense of urgency to reach her mother. Finally, she spotted Ms. Clara sitting in a small, cold room, looking frail and worn, but still holding her head high. "Mom." Maya rushed in, her voice breaking as she rushed to her mother's side. Ms. Clara looked up, her eyes widening with relief. "Oh, Maya, my sweet girl," she said, her voice trembling. They embraced tightly, and for a moment, everything else faded away. "Are you okay? What did they do to you?" Maya asked, pulling back to look at her mother's face. Ms. Clara sighed, her expression a mix of sadness and strength. "I'm all right, just scared, dear. I didn't expect this to happen. But I know I have you in the community behind me. That gives me strength." Maya nodded, feeling a sense of determination welling up inside her. "We're going to make this right, Mom. You deserve justice, and I won't let them get away with this." They held each other's gaze, the bond between mother and daughter unbreakable, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they sat together, the sounds of the crowd outside still echoing in their ears, Maya knew that they were not just fighting for Ms. Clara. They were standing up for everyone who had faced injustice, and together, they would demand the respect and dignity they all deserved. Maya sat in the small room with her mother, Ms. Clara, holding her hand tightly. They shared a moment of comfort, but the urgency of the situation loomed over them like a dark cloud. Maya could hear the chants of the crowd outside, their voices filled with anger and determination. It reminded her of how important this fight was, not just for her mother, but for everyone who had been treated unfairly. After a while, an officer walked into the room, breaking the tense silence. "You have 10 minutes, he said, his tone cold and dismissive. Maya nodded, feeling the pressure of time taking away. "We'll make this count," she said to her mother, trying to muster her courage. "Do you think they'll listen?" Miss Clara asked, concern etched on her face. "What if they just brush it off?" Maya squeezed her hand reassuringly. "They have to listen, Mom. You're not just some old lady, you're a part of this community, and we're all standing behind you." After their brief talk, Maya realized she needed to take action. They couldn't just sit here waiting for someone else to speak up for them. "I have to go talk to the other officers," she said, her voice firm. "I'd want to know what's going to happen next and how we can get you out of here." Miss Clara nodded, pride shining in her eyes. "You're right. You're stronger than I ever was." Maya took a deep breath as she stepped out of the small room. The atmosphere in the station was tense, with officers moving around and people whispering. She felt a rush of determination. This was her chance to make a difference. She walked straight to the front desk, where an officer sat with a bored expression. "Excuse me," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to speak to whoever is in charge. My mother, Miss Clara, was arrested unfairly, and I want to know what is going to happen to her." The officer looked up at her, irritation flickering across his face. "You'll have to wait. The chief is busy," he replied dismissively. Maya refused to be brushed aside. "My mother is sick, and she shouldn't even be in here. We need answers." Her voice grew louder, catching the attention of a few other officers nearby. One of them, Officer Davis, stepped forward, sensing the tension. "What's the issue here?" he asked, his tone more professional. Maya seized the opportunity. "My mother was arrested for no reason. Officer Ryan treated her horribly. We demand to know why she's being held and what charges are against her." Officer Davis sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Let's take a step back. I'll look into this, but you need to calm down. We don't need any trouble here." Maya felt her frustration bubbling up, but she reminded herself that she needed to stay calm to get answers. "Please, just help us. She's a respected member of this community, and she deserves better." Officer Davis nodded slowly, recognizing the passion in her voice. "I understand. Let me see what I can find out." As Officer Davis walked away, Maya returned to her mother's side. "They're going to look into it," she said, trying to sound hopeful. Miss Clara smiled gently, but worry still clouded her eyes. "Thank you, dear. I know this is hard for you, but I appreciate your strength." Meanwhile, outside the station, the crowd continued to grow. Friends, family, and even strangers had gathered, united by their love for Miss Clara and their anger at what had happened. Signs were being waved, and chants echoed through the streets. "Justice for Miss Clara" filled the air, creating a powerful atmosphere of solidarity. Maya glanced out the window and saw Mr. Johnson leading the crowd, inspiring everyone to keep fighting. "We won't back down," he shouted, and the crowd responded with thunderous applause. It was clear to Maya that they were ready to stand up for her mother and demand justice, no matter the cost. Back inside, Officer Davis returned to the front desk with a serious expression. "I've talked to the chief. There's been a misunderstanding, and your mother will be released shortly. We apologize for the situation," he said, trying to maintain professionalism. Relief washed over Maya, but she knew that this was just the beginning. They needed to make sure this didn't happen again. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. "But we still need to address how Officer Ryan treated her. This isn't just about her release. It's about accountability." As they prepared to leave, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had a fight ahead of them, and she was ready to take it on for her mother and their community. Together, they would not just seek justice for Miss Clara, but would strive for a change that would ensure respect and dignity for everyone in their town. As the door to the police station swung open, Maya and Miss Clara stepped out into the light, the crowd's chants greeting them like a warm embrace. The sight of their neighbors rallying together filled Maya's heart with gratitude. People had gathered, arms raised in support, faces lit with determination. The feeling of unity was palpable, as if everyone was connected by an invisible thread of hope and strength. Miss Clara looked around, her heart swelling with emotion. "I never expected this," she said softly, her voice trembling. "These people really care." Maya nodded, her eyes shining. "They love you, Mom. You've always been there for them, and now they're here for you." As they made their way through the crowd, people reached out to hug Miss Clara or shake her hand. "We're so glad you're okay," one neighbor exclaimed, tears of relief in their eyes. "We're not going to let this go. You deserve justice." Miss Clara smiled, the warmth of the community wrapping around her like a blanket, comforting her after a terrifying ordeal. Maya felt a surge of pride as she watched her mother interact with her neighbors. This was more than just a fight for Miss Clara. It was about community, about standing up against injustice together. They were all in this together, and they would face whatever came next as a united front. With renewed purpose, Maya decided it was time to organize a meeting. They needed to talk about what had happened, how to address Officer Ryan's behavior, and how to ensure that no one else would have to go through the same ordeal. "Let's meet at the community center tomorrow," she suggested to Mr. Johnson and some of the other neighbors. "We can share our stories and plan our next steps." Mr. Johnson nodded, his face serious but hopeful. "That's a great idea, Maya. We need to make our voices heard. It's time to hold the police accountable." The group quickly agreed, and they began discussing who would speak, what they wanted to say, and how to spread the word to others in the community. As they talked, Miss Clara listened quietly, her heart swelling with pride for her daughter. Maya was becoming a leader, standing up for what was right. It reminded her of her own younger days when she fought for civil rights, pushing for change in a world that often turned a blind eye to injustice. The spirit of activism burned brightly in her daughter, and it filled Miss Clara with hope for the future. That evening, as they returned home, the weight of the day began to settle. Maya helped her mother prepare dinner, both of them lost in their thoughts. "Mom, are you okay?" Maya asked, glancing over her shoulder. Miss Clara smiled faintly. "I will be. It's just been a long day. But I'm grateful for you and everyone who stood up for me." After dinner, they sat together on the couch, the warmth of family surrounding them. Maya couldn't shake off the worry she felt. What if Officer Ryan doesn't face any consequences? What if this happens again to someone else? She voiced her fears. Miss Clara placed a reassuring hand on her daughter's knee. "We have to believe that our voices matter. If we keep speaking up, change will come. It might take time, but we won't give up." The next day, as the sun rose over their small town, Maya felt a rush of energy and determination. She had prepared notes for the meeting, listing everything she wanted to say. She knew it was time to take a stand, not just for her mother, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. As they arrived at the community center, Maya felt a flutter of nerves. The room was filling with people, each one carrying their own stories, their own experiences. The sight of so many faces united for a common purpose filled her with strength. This was it. This was the moment they would speak up and demand change. When the meeting began, Maya stood in front of the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "Thank you all for being here today. We've gathered because we want to talk about the injustice that happened to my mother. But this isn't just about her. It's about all of us. We need to stand together and fight for what's right." As she spoke, the crowd listened intently, nodding in agreement. Maya could feel the energy in the room shifting, growing stronger with every word. She was no longer just fighting for her mother. She was fighting for the heart and soul of their community. Together, they would demand justice, respect, and change. Together, they would make their voices heard. As Maya stood in front of the gathering at the community center, she felt a wave of support wash over her. The room was filled with familiar faces, each one reflecting a mix of concern and determination. Neighbors she had known all her life, people she had grown up with, and even some she hadn't met yet were all there, united in their desire for change. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words, but also the strength of the community behind her. "Today, we're here to talk about what happened to my mother, Miss Clara," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "She's not just a victim. She's a beloved member of our community, and what happened to her could happen to any of us. We need to stand together to ensure this never happens again." Maya could see heads nodding in agreement, and she pressed on. "Officer Ryan treated my mother with disrespect and cruelty, and that's unacceptable. Our police should be protecting us, not causing harm. We need accountability." The crowd erupted into applause, their enthusiasm giving her courage. Mr. Johnson stepped forward, standing beside her. "Maya is right. We must hold our police accountable for their actions. This isn't just about one bad officer. It's about a system that allows this to happen. We need to demand changes in how our police operate. We need community oversight." His voice rang clear, and the crowd responded with cheers, their energy palpable. Maya watched as more people began to speak up, sharing their own experiences with the police. One woman, Mrs. Stevens, raised her hand. "I've lived in this town for over 30 years, and I've seen things that shouldn't happen. There's a fear in our community that makes people silent. But we can't be silent anymore." Her voice was strong, and it resonated with everyone in the room. Maya felt a rush of pride as she listened to her neighbors share their stories. Each story added to the growing momentum in the room. They spoke of unfair treatment, discrimination, and a need for respect. The room buzzed with energy as they realized they weren't alone in their struggles. Together, they were building a platform for change. As the meeting progressed, Maya suggested they form a committee to address the issues. Let's create a group that focuses on community policing. We can organize regular meetings with the police department, share our concerns, and advocate for policies that protect everyone, she proposed. The crowd erupted in applause, excitement filling the air. More ideas flowed, each one more inspiring than the last. They talked about organizing peaceful demonstrations, creating a petition for change, and raising awareness through social media. People began brainstorming about how to reach out to local news outlets to ensure their voices would be heard beyond their small town. Maya felt a surge of hope as she watched everyone come together. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the beginning of a movement. They were all committed to making a difference, and it was beautiful to see the strength of their unity. Towards the end of the meeting, Ms. Clara spoke up, her voice steady despite the emotions running through her. I've seen a lot in my lifetime, and I've always believed that change is possible when we stand together. I may be an old lady, but my spirit is strong. We must fight for our rights and for those who can't fight for themselves. The crowd cheered, and Maya felt tears welling in her eyes, filled with pride for her mother and the community. As the meeting concluded, they set a date for their next gathering and planned a peaceful protest to raise awareness about the issues they faced. Maya felt a fire in her heart, knowing that they were not just fighting for their rights, but for the rights of everyone who had ever felt powerless. Leaving the community center, Maya and Ms. Clara walked home hand in hand. I can't believe how much we accomplished today, Maya said, her voice filled with excitement. This is just the beginning, Mom. We're going to create real change. Ms. Clara smiled warmly at her daughter. I believe in you, Maya, and I believe in all of us. Together, we can make a difference. As they reached home, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was a fight for justice, dignity, and respect, and they were ready to take it on, one step at a time. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with their community by their side, they felt empowered to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey to justice had begun, and they were all in it together. As the days passed, the energy in the community continued to build. Maya and Ms. Clara found themselves at the center of a movement that had taken root in their small town. People were excited and motivated, ready to bring about change. Flyers were printed, social media posts were shared, and conversations buzzed through homes and workplaces about the upcoming peaceful protest. It felt like a wave of hope washing over them. Maya spent her evenings planning with her neighbors. They met in living rooms, porches, and even at the park, discussing the details of the protest. We need to make our voices heard, Maya said during one meeting. Let's prepare signs that express our message clearly. We want to show the police that we demand respect, dignity, and accountability. Everyone nodded in agreement, their spirits high. On the day of the protest, the sun rose bright and warm, casting a golden glow over the town. Maya and Ms. Clara woke up early, excited and a little nervous. They helped each other get ready, making sure they were dressed comfortably. Maya wore a shirt that said "Justice for Ms. Clara," while Ms. Clara chose a beautiful scarf that had bright colors, symbolizing hope and unity. As they arrived at the park where the protest was set to start, they were greeted by an incredible sight. The park was filled with people, all holding colorful signs that echoed their message. Respect our elders, read one sign. No more silence, shouted another. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter, chatter, and a palpable sense of purpose. Maya's heart raced with excitement as she took in the scene. Look at everyone, Mom. This is amazing, she exclaimed. Miss Clara smiled proudly. I never imagined we could bring so many people together for a cause. This is what community looks like. They joined the crowd, feeling the energy rise as more people arrived. Mr. Johnson took the microphone, his voice booming across the park. "Thank you all for coming today. We are here to demand justice for Ms. Clara and everyone who has faced mistreatment. We will not back down." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices united in a powerful chorus. Maya felt a sense of pride wash over her. This was more than just a protest. It was a celebration of their community, their strength, and their shared determination to fight against injustice. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their collective hope. As the march began, they moved through the streets, chanting and holding their signs high. "Justice for Ms. Clara" echoed through the neighborhood, and people came out of their homes to support them. Some joined the march, while others cheered from their porches. It was a sight to behold, a river of determined faces flowing through their town, united in purpose. At one point, Maya spotted Officer Davis among the crowd. She was surprised to see him there, standing with his arms crossed, observing the march. It was a reminder that the police were watching, and it was important for them to see the strength of the community's resolve. As they reached the town square, the group gathered for speeches. Maya felt her nerves bubble up again. This was her chance to speak out, to share her truth. She stepped forward, her heart racing as she grabbed the microphone. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady. "We're standing together not just for my mom, but for everyone who has felt powerless or disrespected. This is our community, and we deserve better." The crowd cheered, and Maya felt emboldened. "We need to demand changes in our police department. We need to ensure that everyone, regardless of age or color, is treated with respect. No more unjust arrests. No more fear." The cheers grew louder, echoing her passion. As the speeches continued, Maya listened intently to others share their stories. Each voice added depth to their cause, making it clear that this was not just about one person, but about a collective struggle. They were not just fighting against one bad officer. They were advocating for a future where everyone could feel safe and respected. As the protest came to a close, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment. They had raised their voices, and the community had come together in a way she had never seen before. She looked over at her mother, who was surrounded by friends, all of them smiling and holding hands. Ms. Clara looked vibrant and alive, filled with hope. Maya knew that this was just the beginning. They had sparked something important, a movement that could lead to real change. Together, they would continue to fight, to speak up, and to ensure that their community remained united in the pursuit of justice and respect for all. With her mother by her side and their community behind them, Maya felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were not just fighting for a better tomorrow, they were building it together. In the weeks that followed the protest, the momentum in the community only grew stronger. Maya and Ms. Clara, along with Mr. Johnson and others from the committee, continued to meet regularly. They had formed a dedicated group committed to raising awareness about police accountability and promoting a safer, more inclusive environment for everyone. Their voices resonated throughout the town, sparking conversations in homes, schools, and local businesses. Maya took on the role of a spokesperson, often sharing updates on social media and encouraging more people to join their cause. The response was overwhelming. They received messages of support from people who had been affected by similar experiences. Maya felt a deep sense of purpose as she read their stories. It was clear that the issue of police accountability was not just local. It was a nationwide concern, and they were part of something much bigger. One day, during a planning meeting, Mr. Johnson brought up an idea that excited everyone. "What if we organized a community forum?" he suggested. "We could invite local leaders, the police chief, and community members to have an open discussion about the changes we want to see." The room erupted with enthusiasm. Maya's eyes lit up. That's a fantastic idea. It would give everyone a chance to voice their concerns and expectations directly to those in charge. They set a date for the forum and began reaching out to everyone they could think of, spreading the word through flyers, social media, and word of mouth. Maya even visited local schools to talk to students about the importance of standing up for justice and being active members of their community. As the day of the forum approached, anticipation filled the air. Maya felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was their chance to make a real impact, to hold the police accountable, and to ensure their community's voices were heard. She spent countless hours preparing, gathering questions, and encouraging her neighbors to come ready to speak. When the day finally arrived, the community center buzzed with energy. People filled the seats, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Maya stood at the front of the room, looking out at the crowd. Her heart raced, but she was determined to make this a meaningful event. She welcomed everyone and introduced the local leaders, including the police chief, who had agreed to attend. "Thank you all for coming today," she began. "This is a chance for us to come together and discuss how we can make our communities safer and more just for everyone. We want to share our concerns and hear from our police department about how they plan to address them." The audience nodded, their eyes fixed on Maya as she spoke. As the forum progressed, community members began sharing their stories, voicing their concerns, and asking tough questions. One by one, they stood up, recounting their experiences with the police, highlighting instances of disrespect and fear. Maya listened intently, feeling the weight of their words. Each story added to the growing urgency of the conversation. When it was the police chief's turn to speak, Maya felt a mix of hope and apprehension. He acknowledged the concerns raised by the community and promised to take their feedback seriously. "We understand that trust needs to be rebuilt, and we are committed to working with you to ensure our officers treat everyone with dignity," he said earnestly. The crowd listened closely, some still skeptical, but hopeful for change. Maya stood up after him, taking a deep breath. "We appreciate your willingness to listen, but we need action, not just words. We want to see real changes in how our police operate. We deserve transparency and accountability." Her voice rang out with conviction, and the audience erupted in applause. It was clear that everyone shared her desire for real progress. The forum continued, with more questions and discussions, but Maya could feel the energy shifting. There was a sense of unity and determination in the room. They were not just voicing concerns, they were laying the groundwork for a future where respect and justice prevailed. As the event wrapped up, Maya felt a wave of accomplishment wash over her. They had come together as a community, spoken their truth, and held their leaders accountable. It was a pivotal moment, and she knew it would lead to positive changes. In the weeks that followed, they began to see the fruits of their labor. The police department started implementing new training programs focused on community engagement and de-escalation techniques. Maya and the committee were invited to participate in discussions about policies and practices. Their voices were no longer ignored, they were being heard and valued. As she looked back on everything they had accomplished, Maya felt a deep sense of pride. This journey had not only strengthened her bond with her mother, but had also united their entire community. They had turned their pain into power and had become a voice for change. Ms. Clara watched her daughter with admiration. "You've done something incredible, Maya. You've brought people together and sparked a movement for justice." Maya smiled, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom, and all our neighbors. This is just the beginning of our fight for a better community." Together, they had not only changed the narrative for Ms. Clara, but had also ignited a flame of hope that would continue to burn brightly, lighting the way for future generations to stand up for what is right. They had created a legacy of strength, resilience, and unity, proving that when a community comes together, anything is possible.